Have you ever wondered why, despite your best efforts to help others, you sometimes feel drained, exhausted, and even resentful? Have you ever asked yourself why the more you give, the less you seem to have left? The world tells us that sacrifice is noble, that putting others before ourselves is the highest virtue, and while there is truth in that, there is also a deeper wisdom we often overlook. You cannot pour from an empty cup. Think of a candle. If it burns too quickly, without care, it soon fades into darkness. But if it is tended with patience, it shines steadily, bringing warmth and light to many. Your body, your mind, and your soul are not burdens to neglect. They are sacred gifts entrusted to you by God. If you do not care for them, how will you fulfill your purpose? How will you give love when your own heart is weary? How will you offer wisdom when your mind is clouded by exhaustion? Even the greatest acts of love must come from a place of strength. Even Christ, who had more power than any man, stepped away to pray, to rest, to renew his spirit. If he understood the importance of taking care of himself, how can we, in our weakness, believe we are above it? This is not just a speech. It is a wake-up call, a reminder that God does not ask you to destroy yourself for others. He asks you to be strong, so you may serve with wisdom, endurance, and love. By the end of this message, you will see why taking care of yourself is not selfish. It is necessary, because only when you are whole can you truly give to the world what it needs. So, stay with me till the end, because what you're about to hear may just change the way you live, the way you love, and the way you serve. Let's begin. Taking care of oneself is often misunderstood as an act of selfishness, as if prioritizing personal well-being is somehow in conflict with love, service, or faith. Yet, when viewed rightly, self-care is not selfish at all. It is stewardship. To be entrusted with life, body, mind, and soul is to carry a responsibility, not to discard or neglect it under the guise of humility. Imagine a man given a precious tool by his master, meant for an important task. If he throws it aside, lets it rust, or dulls its edges by careless use, has he been a faithful steward? Surely not. The tool is only valuable if it is kept in good condition, sharpened and cared for so that when the time comes, it may serve its purpose well. The same is true of a person's body, mind, and soul. These are not burdens, but gifts, entrusted to us for a reason, and to take care of them is not vanity, but duty. When a person eats nutritious food, rests when needed, and takes time to nourish their mind and spirit, they are not indulging in excess. They are ensuring that they remain strong enough to fulfill their responsibilities. A weary, starving man cannot feed others, just as an exhausted mind cannot think clearly or offer wisdom. Strength is required to give, and strength does not appear out of thin air. It is maintained through deliberate care. Even Christ, in his perfect wisdom, took time to rest and withdraw from the crowds. He did not deplete himself recklessly, though the world's needs were endless. If the very Son of God saw the necessity of tending to his strength, how much more should those who follow him? It is not a lack of love for others that leads one to care for oneself. It is an understanding that only when one is whole can one truly give. There is, of course, a difference between self-care and self-indulgence. The former is a disciplined act of stewardship, ensuring that one remains ready and capable to serve, while the latter seeks pleasure without purpose. But to avoid self-indulgence does not mean one should abandon self-care altogether. The good servant does not waste his master's resources, but neither does he ruin them by neglect. Many believe that to sacrifice oneself completely is the highest form of devotion. Yet, what good is a burnt-out light in a darkened room? What use is a broken instrument in the hands of a skilled musician? God does not ask his people to destroy themselves in their efforts to do good. He calls them to be faithful, and faithfulness requires endurance. Endurance requires strength, and strength is built upon care. Taking care of oneself is not turning away from duty, it is preparing for it. It is ensuring that when the moment comes to serve, to lead, or to give, one is not found lacking. It is honoring the life given, not by wasting it in reckless exhaustion, but by using it wisely, fully, and with purpose. And the command to love one's neighbor is well known, often repeated and widely praised, yet it is rarely examined in its entirety. The full instruction is not simply to love others, but to love them as oneself. This phrase, often overlooked, carries a profound truth. One cannot truly love others unless they first understand and practice love for themselves. To dismiss self-love as unnecessary or selfish is to misunderstand the nature of love itself. Love is not a vague sentiment, but a deliberate act of care, patience, and kindness. If a man is called to love his neighbor as himself, then what does it mean if he neglects himself? If he is cruel to his own soul, dismissive of his own needs, or careless with his own well-being, what kind of love can he offer to others? A man who has never experienced kindness within himself will struggle to give it genuinely to another. A person who does not value their own life will not properly value the lives around them. It is easy to assume that pouring oneself out endlessly for others is the highest form of goodness. Many take pride in exhaustion as if it were proof of devotion. But what they do not realize is that love, when properly understood, is not depletion, it is abundance. To give love, one must first possess it. To possess it, one must cultivate it within. Love for oneself is not an excuse for selfishness, but a foundation for generosity. Consider the way a gardener tends to a tree. If he expects the tree to bear fruit, he must first nourish its roots, ensure it receives water and sunlight, and protect it from harm. He does not accuse the tree of selfishness for taking in what it needs. Rather, he understands that only when the tree is healthy can it offer shade, flowers, and fruit to others. A man is no different. If he does not care for his own mind, body, and spirit, he will eventually wither, and what will remain to give? Even in the smallest of things, this truth is evident. A weary heart offers little comfort. A tired mind struggles to provide wisdom. A broken soul cannot lift another. Those who believe that love is found only in sacrifice must ask themselves whether they are truly helping others when they refuse to help themselves. A man drowning cannot save another man in the water. A candle burned at both ends leaves nothing but darkness. The instruction to love one's neighbor as oneself is not an afterthought, it is a balance. It reminds us that love is not merely outward, but must also be inward. It is not pride to recognize one's worth, for all human beings are created by God, valued by Him and meant to be cared for. If a person believes others are worthy of love, then they must also believe it for themselves. Anything less is not humility, it is a failure to see the full truth of what love truly is. A vessel that is cracked, empty, or broken cannot pour. This simple truth applies not only to objects but to human beings as well. Many people believe that constantly giving, serving, and sacrificing without regard for their own well-being is a mark of virtue. They push themselves beyond their limits, believing that their exhaustion is proof of their goodness. But what they fail to realize is that when a person is depleted, they have nothing left to offer. A heart that is weary cannot offer comfort. A mind that is overwhelmed cannot provide wisdom. A body that is weak cannot serve with strength. There is a difference between giving and depleting. True generosity does not come from emptiness, but from fullness. Imagine a man who carries a cup of water. If the cup is full, he can share with others. If the cup is empty, he has nothing to offer, no matter how much he may wish to give. The same principle applies to emotional, physical, and spiritual well-being. One cannot encourage others while drowning in despair. One cannot guide others when lost in confusion. One cannot lift another when they have no strength left to stand. Even Christ, who had more reason than any man to give endlessly, took time to step away, to rest and to pray. He withdrew from the crowds when needed, not because he did not care, but because he understood that his mission required endurance. If the Son of God saw the necessity of tending to his own strength, how much more should ordinary people recognize this truth? There is wisdom in knowing when to pause, to refill one's cup, so that when the time comes to pour out, there is something worth giving. Many fear that prioritizing self-care is an act of selfishness. They believe that saying no or taking time to rest means they are failing in their duty to others. But self-care is not about neglecting responsibilities. It is about maintaining the ability to fulfill them well. A tired mind makes mistakes. A weary soul lacks compassion. A fatigued body cannot continue its work. What seems like an act of devotion, pushing oneself beyond reasonable limits, often results in diminished effectiveness. When a person runs themselves into the ground, they do not become more useful, they become less so. Some may argue that true love demands complete self-sacrifice, but love that destroys the giver is not sustainable love. It is a fleeting moment of effort that soon burns out. The strongest servants, the most enduring leaders, the most compassionate hearts are those who have learned to care for themselves first. They recognize that keeping themselves whole is not a betrayal of their mission, but a necessary part of it. A broken vessel spills nothing but loss. A full vessel, well kept and strong, can pour out again and again. The choice is not between serving others and taking care of oneself. The choice is between temporary effort that soon collapses and sustained strength that continues to give. The body and mind are not burdens to be endured, but gifts to be cared for. Too often people view their physical and mental well-being as secondary concerns, something to be ignored in the pursuit of greater responsibilities. Some even go so far as to believe that neglecting oneself is a sign of higher devotion, as if suffering needlessly is proof of virtue. But this way of thinking is deeply flawed. If something has been given by God, then it is meant to be valued, and if life itself, along with the body that carries it and the mind that shapes it, is a gift, then it is not only wise but necessary to take care of it. A person who mistreats their health, disregards their rest, and pushes their mind into exhaustion does not display holiness, but carelessness. No one praises a man for breaking a valuable tool that was entrusted to him. If he allows a fine watch to rust or a strong house to crumble due to neglect, he is not seen as humble, but as irresponsible. The same applies to the human body and mind. They are instruments meant to be maintained, for they are what allow a person to live, to serve, and to fulfill their purpose. It is easy to see physical well-being as a lesser concern, something unworthy of deep thought. But even the simplest acts, eating, sleeping, exercising, taking time to reflect, have profound effects on a person's ability to function. A weak body limits what a person can do. A weary mind clouds judgment and steals peace. A neglected soul struggles to find joy. None of these things are unimportant. In fact, they determine the quality of everything else in life. Many people believe that to care for oneself is to indulge in excess, as if there is no difference between proper care and selfish pleasure. But there is a difference between discipline and indulgence, between nourishment and wastefulness. Just as a farmer does not overfeed his animals, but ensures they are healthy enough to work, a person must tend to their own well-being with wisdom. There is no honor in unnecessary suffering, just as there is no wisdom in reckless indulgence. The balance lies in understanding that life itself is a trust, and what is trusted to a person must be cared for. Even in spiritual matters, this truth remains. A mind that is clouded with exhaustion struggles to find faith. A body weakened by neglect makes devotion harder, not easier. To love and serve well, one must first be well. God has not given people life so they may waste it through carelessness or unnecessary hardship. Instead, He has given them the ability to sustain it, to protect it, and to use it wisely. A person's body and mind are not obstacles in the way of purpose. They are the means by which purpose is fulfilled. To care for them is not selfish. It is an act of gratitude, a recognition that what has been given is worth keeping, worth strengthening, and worth honoring. There is a delicate balance between serving others and preserving oneself. Many people believe that true goodness is found in constant sacrifice, in giving all that they have until nothing remains. They see rest as weakness, self-care as selfishness, and personal well-being as something to be ignored in the name of duty. But this way of thinking leads not to greater service, but to eventual collapse. A person who does not take care of themselves cannot sustain their efforts to help others. Even the noblest intentions become futile when one is too weak to carry them out. A man who builds a house does not ignore its foundation. He does not say, "I will use all my materials for the walls and roof, for the foundation is not important." If he does, the house will soon crumble, and all his work will be wasted. The same is true for a person who gives endlessly without preserving their own strength. If they do not rest, if they do not tend to their own needs, they will soon find themselves unable to continue. Their love, their wisdom, and their energy will run dry, and they will be left with nothing to offer. Even in nature, balance is essential. A river that constantly pours out without being replenished will run dry. A tree that gives fruit but is never watered will wither. No one would call these things selfish for needing renewal. Yet many believe that human beings should function without pause, without nourishment, without care. This is not wisdom, it is a misunderstanding of how strength is sustained. Christ Himself understood this balance. Though He healed the sick, preached to the crowds, and gave endlessly, He also stepped away to pray, to rest, and to renew His spirit. He did not see these moments as distractions from His mission, but as necessary parts of it. If even He, who had limitless power, took time to retreat, how much more should ordinary people recognize their own need for restoration? Some may argue that life's demands are too great, that there is no time for self-care when others are suffering. But a person who is exhausted, broken, and overwhelmed cannot truly help those in need. A weary mind makes poor decisions. A fatigued body lacks endurance. A drained heart struggles to show love. True service is not found in reckless self-destruction, but in steady, sustained effort. And that effort is only possible when a person knows when to pause, when to rest, and when to restore their strength. Sacrifice, when done wisely, is noble, but sacrifice that leads to self-destruction benefits no one. A person must learn when to give and when to step back, when to push forward and when to recover. The strongest hands are those that are not overworked to the point of breaking. The kindest hearts are those that have not been worn down by exhaustion. Balance is not avoidance of duty, it is the only way to fulfill it fully and for as long as it is needed. A person's ability to serve, love, and fulfill their purpose is directly tied to how well they care for themselves. Many believe that self-sacrifice means giving until there is nothing left, but this is a misunderstanding of what true service requires. Strength is not an infinite resource. It must be maintained, renewed, and protected. A warrior does not enter battle with a dull sword. A runner does not begin a race without first training his body. And a person who wishes to do good in the world must first ensure they have the energy, wisdom, and endurance to sustain their efforts. There is a danger in neglecting oneself. At first it may seem noble, working without rest, serving without pause, giving without limit, but Over time, this leads not to greater effectiveness, but to exhaustion, bitterness, and even resentment. A person who is drained of energy cannot give their best to others. Their mind grows clouded, their patience wears thin, and their joy fades. Instead of helping, they become a burden to those around them, not because they lack good intentions, but because they have nothing left to give. Even love, the greatest of virtues, cannot be poured endlessly from an empty heart. A person who does not care for their own emotional and spiritual well-being will find themselves struggling to show kindness. Instead of offering warmth, they may become cold. Instead of providing encouragement, they may speak in frustration. Their efforts to help may become mechanical rather than genuine. True love is not about draining oneself dry. It is about ensuring that what is given is meaningful, strong, and lasting. Christ himself provided an example of this. Though he was compassionate, he also took time to step away, to rest, and to renew his strength. He did not see rest as weakness, nor did he allow the constant demands of others to drain him beyond what was necessary. His love was not reckless exhaustion, but steady, enduring, and wise. Those who believe that serving others means neglecting oneself would do well to consider his example. Self-care is not about indulgence or selfishness. It is about ensuring that a person remains capable of fulfilling their responsibilities. A farmer does not refuse to eat because he is too busy planting crops. A teacher does not stop learning because they are too focused on educating others. In every area of life, maintaining one's own well-being is essential to being effective. If a person truly wishes to make a difference, they must first ensure they are strong enough to do so. They must protect their energy